From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the African and Middle East Division of the Library of Congress. Today's lecture on analysis and curation of the American travelers' visual documents of 1870 to 1936 on Central Asian nomadic culture by Saule Satayeva is brought to you and sponsored by the Near East section of the African and Middle East Division. I'm Joan Weeks, head of the Near East section, and on behalf of all my colleagues, in particular Dr. Mary Jane Deeb, who couldn't be with us today due to a conflicting program, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone. And before we start today's program, I'd like to give you a brief overview of the division and its resources in the hopes that you'll come again and use our collections for your research. This division, as many of you know that have attended a lot of these programs, is comprised of 3 sections that serve the collections to researchers from around the world. We cover 78 countries and more than 35 languages. The African section includes all of sub-Saharan Africa. The Hebraic section is responsible for Judaica and Hebraica worldwide. And the Near East section covers all of the Arab countries, including North Africa, Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Central Asia, the Muslims of Western China, Russia, and the Balkans, as well as the peoples of the Caucasus. So we really cover an extensive area with our collections and our programs. Just a couple housekeeping things first. After the program, we invite you to fill in the evaluation forms that we've placed on your seats, and please leave them in the box at the information desk as you're leaving. Secondly, we would like to invite you to ask questions at the end, but just remind you that you're being videotaped so that if you do ask questions, you are giving us permission to be recorded. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Saule Satayeva is Vice Director of the Kazakh Central State Archive of Cinema, Photo, and Sound Recording Documents in Astana, Kazakhstan, a position she's held since 2010. Saule was born into a family of a famous Kazakh writer, playwright, archivist, Amantay Satayev, and grew up among old manuscripts and photographs. And you can see how now this has influenced her life, career, and passion. Her father's dream was for her to graduate with a scientific degree and become a Fulbright scholar. Quite an ambitious dream for your daughter. Well, she did graduate with a degree in engineering from Almaty Technical University, and was a Fulbright scholar at American University here in Washington from 2012 to 2013, where she did archival research relating to illuminating the Kazakh Nomadic culture. She is a member of the Kazakh Society of Archivists. Today's program draws upon her archival research of the American travels who illuminated Kazakh nomadic culture through their visual documents. And please give me a warm welcome to invite Saule to the podium to show us all of her photographic collection. Thank you.
Thank you so much for so warm introducing. I'm very happy to be in this great country and great library. And let me start my talk. It is recognized today that the latest stage of our global consumer culture have created a new crisis. And many scholars now looking for the ways and discuss the features of a new ideology that will prolong the existence of human beings by reducing competition for land, for water and food, and by preserving natural resources. And scholars now realize the correlations between this ideology and ideology of nomadic cultures, and explore the way in which this ancient culture can inform our lives, our lifestyles in the future. And this project represents the outgrowth of my dissertation based on a comparative analysis of visual documents and writing sources. And also, I have been studying this project, the subject of nomadic culture in visual documents for many years. And first I have made research in Kazakh libraries, where I was fortunate to uncover several printed works of foreign travelers to Asia, and also a bibliographical edition listing travelers to Central Asia. And the second was my Fulbright scholarship, where when I was fortunate to uncover visual documents of American travelers to Kazakhstan while presenting lectures at Harvard, Columbia, Wisconsin-Madison, Indiana, Texas, and Maryland universities, as well as at Wilson Center, Smithsonian Institution, and American University in Washington, D.C. But it was one of your best librarians, Harold Leich, who I contacted when I just have a dream to come here as a Fulbright scholar. It was in early 2 millennium, and I got his very warm invitation to come sometimes and to do research at the Library of Congress. And when I came here, Harold Leich and Patrick Loughney, they gave me a tour to Packard campus, which has a huge collection of audio-visual documents from all over the world. And you can see here how Patrick opened me a door to explore the treasures of the Library of Congress, and I'm very grateful for the library and for my colleagues. And also, I hope to contact a new audience here in DC now during my very short stay here, because it is the 9th largest country in the world, and it is strategically vital region in Eurasia, as well as very peaceful and reliable country in Central Asia. And Americans, in my experience, know very little about Kazakhstan. But, and this is the map of my country, and you can see in the center Astana. My archive and I live in Almaty, which is, I cannot show you, which is Almaty on the border with Kyrgyzstan, and you can see we are situated between two huge empires, Russian Federation and China, and also Central Asian republics. In our country, we have everything except ocean. To sea, Caspian and Aral Sea, a lot of rivers, beautiful mountains. We have a western range of Tian Shan Mountains. We have steppe, lakes, desert, semi-desert, everything. And we have very beautiful nature. Today, and also that I would like to show the pictures of my father, who was a student at the Moscow Historical Archival University in late 1940s. And exactly at that time, he studied American travelers' diaries at the Lenin Library. So he kept these notes until I grew up and made me interesting. He made me interesting in this very interesting subject. And he also was the author of a number of documental movies related to the history of Kazakhstan. And today my talk would be focused on 3 questions. Why the history and culture of nomads must be studied today, and about the exceptionality of the Kazakh nomadic culture, and about Americans who contributed in preserving our nomadic history. The understanding how human nowadays they shape the planet shows us that nomadic economy now exists in almost 30 countries, involving in total about 40 million people. And nomads in China and Mongolia, nomads in Siberia, in South Africa, and in North America, they live in desert, semi-desert, tundra and steppe where agriculture is impossible. And in the 21st century, Mongols and Kazakhs, who historically lived on that territory as the so-called irredenta, and some tribes were migrated during trying to escape the Soviet policy, they well adapted to a modernizing world, and their tradition and isolation help preserve their lifestyle. They use achievements of civilization that not prevent them from migrating while maintaining their ancestors' heritage, including principles of sufficient consumption and also genetic health. Nomadic society has been transforming. However, in psychology and life attitudes, traces of nomadic culture habits have been preserved. If over time reminiscences of nomadism will be a thing of the past, today there is less time for reconstruction of this very unique culture. With the example of Kazakhs, it is known that the longest preserved elements of sacred property, even with the full replacement of traditional livelihood systems by innovations. And also in the modern educational system, the young generation is used to get very fast and visual information, and we have to help them to urge a deeper interest in ethno-cultural and artistic disciplines. And there is a task to educate tolerant people, which would be interesting to create conditions for identification with native culture and exploration of the variety of cultures, beliefs, and social political systems. About the exceptionality of Kazakh nomadic culture. The Kazakhs have been the object of Western research in Oriental studies, cultural studies, linguistic, anthropology, archaeology, historical geography, because their territory included in the vast steppe empires such as Scythians, Huns, Turkic Empire, Western and Eastern, Kipchaks, Timurids, and Mongol Empire. And also, the Kazakh language consists of 2.5 million words, and it is very valuable source. Also, the Kazakh ancestors' brilliant epic oral tradition was continued in the Kazakh culture. And another point is that the Kazakhs ethnically emerged from a union of different nations, and their uniqueness of the nomadic culture is a combination of steppe and town. A major characteristic of the Kazakh nomadic culture that in difficult climatic conditions, people kept in harmony with nature and created a symbiosis between urban and rural environments. In the nomad society, however, existed a contempt of agricultural employment, which they viewed as disadvantageous pastoralists. In their mind, an inability to migrate and lack of cattle considered almost a humiliation and shame. And in 1897, the general population survey data of the Russian Empire indicates that 80% of 6 million Kazakhs' livelihood stemmed from pastoral products, and 18 came specifically from both integrated cattle and farming only in natural irrigated areas. The Kazakh migrated up to 120 times a year. So some clans had nomad way of life to migrate along the natural water resources, and some they had to migrate along the artificial water sources like draw wells. And it was settled in ancient time during the Kazakhstan. It was organized in the early 15th century. So it was settled by Kazakh Khans, which clan have this certain way of migration. And in addition, the Kazakhs, that's the draw wells and the archaeological finds of how they watered cattle. In addition, the Kazakhs were engaged in fishing and hunting. The Kazakhs hunted with falcon, and also they had a special breed of hunting horses named Taza, and also they hunted with a golden eagle. And also in a variety of arts and crafts. Because the Kazakh had this nomad way of life and they had to migrate many times a year, they couldn't keep with themselves decorations, special decorations. So they made every piece, every bedding, furniture, dishes, carpets, they made it as a piece of art, and they also used it other things. And this thing they pass it from generation to generation. In springtime, they left winter camps for meadows, and camels and horses and sheep grazed freely in the vast area, and this semi-nomadic modification lasted until the early 1940s. And for centuries, Kazakhs absorbed cultural influences, assimilating some of them. Mongol, Islamic, and Russian influence did not change them radically. They demonstrated their adaptability under the constantly changing environment, because Kazakhstan was always on the crossroad of different cultures from west and east. And it was a Silk Way, and through Kazakhstan and exactly from through Almaty, there were several ways to get from Europe to China, India, or Mongolia. And the extinction of Kazakh nomadic culture was caused by the colonization policy of Russian Empire, civil war, Russian Revolution, and followed civil war, and Soviet agricultural policy that brought to the Great Famine in the 1930s, and migration to neighborhood countries, thousands, hundreds of Kazakh nomads. And also another huge impact was the Stalin's repression regime against the so-called people's enemies, when almost all our intelligent, progressive, and well-educated personalities were killed as the peoples of enemies. Collectivization and decollectivization in 1928 caused a wave of huge uprising in the entire country, in the entire Soviet Union. But in Kazakhstan, they were most widespread because have not been yet destroyed traditional clan system. According to archival documents from 1928 till 1933, there were over 400 uprisings and riots, but the rebel sources with their limited arms couldn't be compared with the well-trained Red Army units and OGPU divisions. And one of the Soviet power achievements was that it's totally changed the face of the society, especially the young generation psychology, that all the authorities' action to suppress people's enemies were supported, silently supported in the community. And the origin of Stalin's struggle with nationalism can be found in his total rejection of our intelligent people strive for independence, which he considered as a game taken too seriously by our advanced and well-educated people. The Communist Party needed money to convert country from industrial into agricultural into industrial. Therefore, they needed rich people properties. In the minds of Stalin and Goloshokin, the ruler of Kazakhstan, the Kazakhs were a rich nation because less than 5 million people, they had 40 million head of stock. And starting from 1928, they erected several factories to produce meat and sell it to the Western countries, and also sell a lot of wheat to Western countries. And from 40 million head of stock in 1933 left only 4 million. And that of the an analysis of our historians and demographers shows that my people lost 2.2 million people, and that was 49% of population at that time, and 600,000 Kazakhs migrated to neighborhood countries. And that was the end of Kazakh nomadic culture. The problem of the Kazakh famine and nomadic cultural research should be studied for the sake of historical truth and justice, and also in order to prevent repetition of similar tragedies in the future. And my work and research will have further understanding of Kazakh culture and how it relates to other unique nomadic cultures. Philosophers and culturologists know that the more intensively the world unites, the more actively people connect to protect their national identity, and believe that in order to survive in the global world, they should strengthen their cultural roots. And this is two-pronged process reflects the dialectic of globalization law. And we have a general crisis of values now, because the manufacture of human happiness has become the central problem of a new technological age. There is free will, but to change this is impossible without changing the individual's relation to the world. And we need the more highest and more reliable reference points. When I did research in the Kazakh Library of Academy of Science, I have found the printed manuscript of Armeni Vamberi, the Hungarian traveler, who in 1880s, as a pilgrim, he made journey, he was Turkologist, linguist, he made journey from Hungary to East, to Asia. And he wrote that he had to sleep with only one eye closed, because when he was afraid that when he would speak in his native language in his dreams. So at that time, for foreign people from Europe, it was very dangerous to do such kind of trips. And he wrote in that book that he met one Kazakh woman, and he asked her about the reasons inducing them to migrate, and she answered him with laughter. "We are not so lazy as you are, Mullah. We cannot sit on one place whole days. You see, the man should move, because the moon, stars, sun, water, animals, birds, fish all move, only ground and that remain on a place." And 2 years ago, I was in a conference in Moscow, and I realized my long plan to visit the Museum of Nomadic Culture in Moscow and meet the director of that museum, Konstantin Kuksin, which I knew by his publication before. And Konstantin Kuksin, he travels all over the world, and he has a number of dwelling houses of different nomadic people. And it's very nice museum. This is Kazakh yurt. He collected all that materials. And that's he said that if you want to study Kazakh nomadic culture, you should go to Mongolia. That is his citation from his article, and I totally agree that nomadic people with their way of life are not an echo of bygone centuries. They live in the 21st century among us and keep their modest life, despite the fact that many great empires collapsed, leaving us with only records and monuments, because they took just like that, not giving anything in return. In fact, nobody knows where is going with the Western civilization. And if the world will suffer from a catastrophe, it's more likely that only nomads will survive. That's why he considered that nomads are a very strong reserve of human civilization. So I came to my last part of my talk, and I'm very happy to talk about brave, curious, intelligent, well-educated American travelers who did not afraid to go to the land of terra incognita in the late 19th century, beginning of 20. And the reconstruction of more adequate picture of the past demands the examination of new sources, which offer us the possibility to expand our past representations. And the study of nomadic culture is impossible without bringing in writing and visual documents created by participants or direct eyewitnesses. So diaries of foreign travelers, scholars, diplomats, merchants falls into that category. And they have great value because they brightly express the color of the epoch and give certain information on historiography, economic employments, way of life, traditions, and customs. And that is the information how men study in a man in all variety of his display. And also audiovisual documents. This is George Kennan, one of the famous journalists and traveler. In 1885, he researched the life of peoples of Siberia and Kazakhstan. And from the American biographic sources follows that he was typical self-made man. In May 1855, at orders of Century Illustrated Monthly magazine, together with the artist George Frost, he studied exiled places of political prisoners of Imperial Russia located on the territory of Kazakhstan. The imperial administration, alongside with exiling unreliable people, carried out the policy of colonization of Kazakhstan. And travelers were equipped with bulky photographic devices, and George Frost did numerous drawings and photographs. And this is a marketplace in Simipalatins. This is one of the biggest city in Kazakhstan. Kazakh Nomadic, they documented. Also, Simipalatins, we have a very big Irtysh river and ferry on it. In his archive, there are a lot of photographs of exiled people, and very interesting photographs when Kazakhs had a meeting with official general government in Semipalatinsk. And also they documented some nature, the Kazakh steppe in spring. So you can see that, and I were a witness of this, that visual documents, photographs, cinema documents, they can offer previously unknown facts or already forgotten facts, which is sometimes the same, and or important data to triangulate with already known events, and they fix information that cannot be reflected in other kind of sources. Eugen Schuyler, he was consul at Moscow and St. Petersburg in 1870-1876, and he was familiar with a very well-known Russian writers, scholars, military men, and he was very well in good relations with Lev Tolstoy. And Lev Tolstoy, he advised him to go to Orenburg, which was used to be the capital of Kazakh Khanate, which is up of the Caspian Sea. And he advised him to go to the east. Supplied him with letters and recommendations to his friends and relatives. So Schuyler traveled by train to Orenburg, and from Orenburg he traveled along Caspian Sea, Aral Sea, and also the cities that placed in that area. Later he appeared with the reports about his trips at the session of Russian Geographic Society and became its full member. And also he met the son of the last Khan of the Western Horde, Gubadullah Jahangirov, who introduced Schuyler to the history of the mausoleum Hoja Ahmed Yesavi and its unique exhibits. And he wrote, almost our only fellow passenger in the carriage was Prince Chingiz, a lineal descendant of famous Chingiz Khan and a son of the last Khan of the Bukeyev court of Kyrgyz. Strange that on the threshold of Asia I should meet the descendants of his greatest conqueror. After the death of his father, he, the eldest son, was given the Russian title of prince in memory of his ancient lineage and of the service of his father. Really, Gubadullah Jahangirov was a very interesting and outstanding companion of American diplomat. He left from Corps of Pages in St. Petersburg, and for participation in Russian-Turkish War in 1877, he received a rank of general-major. Schuyler characterized him as a cultural diplomat, deeply known in French literature. And he helped Eugene Schuyler to visit Mausoleum Hoja Ahmed Yesavi, and later Schuyler wrote about this majestic structure. He was there at the restless time. Mausoleum was in the center of events when Imperial Army of Russia started its military expansion against Central Asian Khans, Khiva, Bukhara, and Kokand. Today, the information written by the American diplomat interesting, first, because his own vision of the mausoleum, and second, at that time, the mausoleum was used as an armory, and all the gravestones and monuments were taken out. And Schuyler's records provide some information about where exactly Kazakh Khans and their descendants have been buried. And the fact that the imperial conquerors intended to destroy this unique structure is well known, and only intervention of the advanced democratic people opinion rescued it from the destruction. And there's pictures of the nowadays mausoleum, which is it is very unique structure in Central Asia. It is one of the biggest, and there is some elements of the mausoleum, and it's very crowded for tourists and also for people who follow Islam in Central Asia. And also, it's interesting how Schuyler wrote about the area where he visited. The whole area carries on itself the traces of ancient cultivation. It is obvious there exists a vast settlement of the people. Here the hills covered by breaks of haloxylon and other bush here and there apparently. They are ruins of ancient cities evidently. There exists an old legend that all valley of Sirdarya was so dense populated one time that a nightingale flying from a branch to branch of fruit trees and a cat running from a wall to wall and from a roof to roof could reach from the Kashgar up to the Aral. By traces of this part of the river, here there were large prosperous cities here, among which was Atrar, Saurand, Tent, and Tanikent were allocated. And that's true. Later, Kazakhstan is one of the unique places where lived people since ancient time. And we have over 300 places of ancient petroglyphs. And also our archaeologists discovered over 150 towns and settlements only along Sirdarya River. And also a lot of towns were discovered in the north, east, west, and center of Kazakhstan. For example, this is a burial mound of Scythian culture, which could be found from the Pacific Ocean to the Black Sea. Balbals from the Turkic Empire time, and also a number of mausoleums. Another great American traveler, Januarius MacGahan, correspondent of New York Herald. He was another scholar's encounter. In 1873, with extreme hardship, he reached the Russian army before Khiva and sent to the Herald reports of his campaign, which won him high admiration both at home and in Europe. His account of capitulation of the city being regarded as a masterpiece of military journalism. It is known that MacGahan gave description of historical monuments, music, culture, way of life of Kazakhs. And what is the more interesting and unique for us, that he wrote about Kazakh national instrument Dombra, which was popular and now very popular. And usually it has two strings, but he wrote that this Dombra has third string made of copper. And it's very rare musical instruments, and Kazakh used it since ancient time, from ID centuries. The famous American geologist William David Morris visited our southeast territory in 1913, and he studied Tian Shan Mountains in connection to the global problem of interrelation of nature. Specifically, he looked how changing climatic condition of Asia influenced the changing the history of people who lived in that territory. And when I was presenting lecture at Harvard University, I had only 3 days, and that university has a number of libraries. So just on the last day, just a few hours before my plane, I found his diaries, named Turkestan 1 and Turkestan 2, and I managed to make pictures from my cell phone, and I was very happy. And this album has a lot of beautiful drawings, and also some of the drawings not only about his profession, about geology, and also about our culture. And that was very interesting that I lived in Harvard and I had to go to Boston, so I had to be in Boston as well. So I made a stop in Boston, went up from metro, made pictures in 4 directions, and now I can say that I was in Boston as well, but it was just maybe 1 minute. So that in that way I managed to discover photographs when I did my talks in different universities. So one of the brightest collection I discovered in the archive of New York Natural History Museum. In 1926, they sent expedition to Asia, the so-called Modern and Clark Asiatic Expedition. And in that expedition included a lot of botanists, anthropologists, zoologists, photographers, and they documented everything they saw, and including our flora and fauna of the region they visited, and also way of life and economic employments of the nations who lived in that territory, including Kazakhs. And this is a screenshot from the silent movie they provided me the copy of the silent movie, and you can see they started from Bombay, they crossed India, they crossed Tibet, then they crossed China and Kazakhstan, and also the places where lived Kyrgyz, Uyghurs, and also Russia. And in Biysk, they took train to Beijing. So it was a very long, very interesting expedition. And if we will have time, I would like to show you a little bit of this movie. And later, William Morden, he wrote this unique publication, published this about their life during this expedition. On this picture, you can see camels. Camels are very important animal for the caravan. Only camel can see straight to the face of the hurricane, and he can bring you to the place you need. Even no one can see anything except snow and wind. So it is very valuable, very reliable, wise, and stable cattle in our culture. Red Army soldiers, 1926. Kazakh hunter, in my last days of my Fulbright scholarship, all the 11 months when I have been here, I tried to see the collection of National Geographic, but I was denied because they said that their archive are not for the international researchers. So, but we lived here, we made a lot of friends and colleagues, and one of my friend who adopted Kazakh boy, her brother's wife worked for that National Geographic Society. So again, in the last days of my stay here, I was allowed to see archives of National Geographic Society. And they said, you have only 1 hour. So I had to be very fast. And I made pictures of their archive. And it was amazing because in 1936, there was a sun eclipse. Eclipse. Sun eclipse. And in the entire Soviet Union, there were about 40 expeditions, including Soviet expeditions, and American Bureau of Standards as well. So they were in Kazakhstan, in our Kustanay city and Akbulak village, and they documented this very rare astronomical event on the June 19, 1936. And at that time, they situated from the Black Sea to Kamchatka. And among them were photographers, Irving Gardner, Paul McNally, and Robert Moore. And they documented also the life of ordinary citizens and Kazakh people. And why they're valuable? Because that is unique visual information about Kazakhs that survived after the Great Famine in 1933, 1931, 1933. So the English proverb says that lookers on see the most of the game. And I believe that American travelers' documents, visual documents, counsel a lot of riddles that should be discovered. And it is especially important to note that American travelers' photographs have not been yet the subject of a special study in the history to study nomadic culture. And travelers' personal photographs, they are obviously less official, less political than official publications. And ancient nomadic tradition, material culture are less present in material data because felt, leather, or wood are not easily preserved. And it is hard to imagine, reading text, hard to imagine how nomads dressed, looked like, and lived. And also, one of the obstacles of Kazakh historiography is the lack or is not relatively not big amount of writing and visual documents. And most documents were made by neighborhood countries, and because of political influence, they are not full and objective. And for the long time, the Kazakhs in Russian historiography were called Kyrgyz, which was a mistake. And also, it's very difficult for researchers to study, to identify which is belong to Kyrgyz culture, nomadic, or to Kazakh culture. And thanks to the Library of Congress, that accumulated a huge amount of documents, visual and writing. And our task is to find the most appropriate use or usage of this heritage. And I have applied for the Library of Congress scholarship, Kluch scholarship, and with the idea to create digital album about named American travelers to Central Asia with their portraits, photographs. They made drawings and also concise and to the point citation from their writing documents. These two documents would support one other. And for us archivists and scholars, very important to find as much documents as possible and to enter them into scholarly circulation and help the other researchers to write their works based on comparative analysis of writing and visual documents. And only that archival documents that entered into the circulation and published can pass the stage of unit of storage into the historical source. So I'm very grateful for the Library of Congress for this chance to talk to this audience and even to the global audience that will see my presentation, and also very grateful that American travelers also made me travel and very skilled traveler, very fast traveler. So thank you so much for your attention, and this is the end of my talk, and I would be happy to answer to your questions. Would you like to see a short? No, just from the geek. It's silent. William Morden, James Clark. Armenian Vambery wrote that he saw that when one family with camels, sheep, and horses came to stay on one place, that within 45 minutes, that house was already finished. Cattle was grazing nearby, fire was on, and food already prepared. So because every member of the family, they worked as a team, very fast. So also, I would like to present this archival journal to the library with my article in it, and also with a lot of articles of our archivists and scholars. This is one of the famous archival journal in Kazakhstan, and it would be a great honor for us to have it in your library. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this and for this brilliant presentation. It's been fantastic. I think we've all seen new things that we would never have seen before, and I certainly am going to try to do a better job of traveling and documenting as a result. We do have a few minutes for a couple of questions if someone would like to ask them. Anybody have a question? Yes.
This is about your father's films. You said you made documentary films?
Yes.
Are they available somewhere?
Yes, they are available.
Repeat the question for the audience.
About my father, who was the author of several documental movies relating to the history and culture of Kazakh people. They are available, yes, they are available. They are in our archive, because my archive is a cinema, photo, and sound recording documents, and also they are available in our Kazakh film studio.
Can you upload them, maybe to YouTube or something?
Yes, I will try to do this. Definitely. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for the wonderful, really interesting talk. You could see I was writing lots of notes because I'm very interested in this topic. I have two brief questions. One is just a thought. Have you looked at the writings of Langston Hughes? Because he went to Central Asia, I think mostly to Uzbekistan, but I think he might have gone to Kazakhstan, and I'm curious, he was also in the 1920s. I wonder if he took any photos of, we can talk afterwards, but I think he might have taken, maybe he took some photos of Kazakhs. So that could be another American to add to your collection.
Yes, exactly.
And then the second question is, I'm wondering sometimes, and this is of my own curiosity because I find it very difficult, as you mentioned, there was this confusion about what Kazakhs should be called, whether they should be called Kyrgyz, whether they should be called this other name, and sometimes also people on the ground, especially these American travelers, didn't understand maybe who they were meeting, whether it was a Kazakh or Kyrgyz or so on. And I imagine that's particularly difficult in the film versus when they go through many different places. And I'm wondering, how do you tell? How do you tell in your own, when you're using these images, how do you tell, what group it is?
Mm-hmm. So about the first question about American traveler Langston Hughes, I didn't heard about him.
I'll tell you about it.
That would be great, because I always like to add traveler to my list. And about second question about this very huge obstacle that we are in Russian historiography, we're all called Kyrgyz. Yes, and this is quite easy if I do research about travelers who did in Siberia. So in Siberia there were no Kyrgyz, they were Kazakhs. And it's quite difficult if it's Turkestan area. Or So the way I can tell is that in that movie especially, the Kyrgyz were first after Tibet. Kyrgyz were first, and they used in their nomadic economy yaks. And after that, we are. So that's why because it's chronological. They went up through, so Kyrgyz were on that side of, south side of Tian Shan Mountains, and we are on the north side. So it's only chronological. And also, of course, our specialists can see the yurt, especially dwelling house, it's similar at first sight, but it has some differences. And our specialists can differ. And also by style of dress, by animal they use. So there are some hinges that scholars can use. But it is, of course, it would be easy if we were Kazakhs everywhere in many sources. So that was unfortunate for us. So thank you for the question.
Just one more question? Anybody have one? Okay, well, thank you so much for this wonderful addition to the collections. Let's give another round of applause as well.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.